Good morning, Dog Nation. I am Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Breda Pest Management. And we, perhaps, are going dancing. Dogs back in the NCAA Tournament. It certainly appears that could be the case after a win last night against South Carolina. We'll talk about that on the program today. But you know our job. Listen, we love when the basketball team does well. We love it when all UGA athletic teams do well. However, we got to talk about football because that is what we're paid to do. That's what you came here to do. So off the top of the program today, as we inch closer to spring practice, we told you, we're going to highlight this week lots of examples of why reinvigorated hope, excitement around Georgia, why that is a very realistic thing with spring practice on the horizon set to begin next week, including today, another one of these five-star freshmen getting a lot of attention. This is fun. We're going to do it together. We're glad you're with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Breda Pest Management. And it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Breda Pest Management, the official pest control of UGA athletics.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
All right, coming up in a couple of moments, what a night it was last night for Georgia basketball, keeping the hot streak going, 3 straight really impressive wins for them. This one perhaps the biggest of them all. We will get to that here coming up in just a little bit. Prior to that, though, let me continue a theme that we've been on, and we are very excited about the start of spring practice next week. We're just happy to have football kind of back in our lives again. But in addition to that, we think that there's legitimately reasons to be, very eager to see the brand of football that Georgia kind of puts forth this spring, obviously culminating in G-Day coming up later on in April, which is now officially next month. That's always really exciting. So we think there's some legitimate reasons for excitement. What we said yesterday is that we're going to try to kind of use a few days, at least the rest of this week, starting yesterday on a Tuesday, today, tomorrow, Friday, at least these days, kind of focusing in on some specific reasons why there is reason for hope for Georgia here this spring. And thankfully, with a program like UGA, you never have to look very far to find that. Now, let me start with the genesis of this entire discussion, and then I'll recap briefly what we said yesterday. A guy named Brandon Marcello, writing CBSSports.com, was looking at a storyline for UGA, obviously referencing the fact, well, in fact, let me just show you this on the screen here, referencing the fact that, there's a lot of changeover from Georgia. Only bring back 7 returning starters, and as he says, that Georgia last year this was the quote, did just enough to be a threat in the national picture, but something, he says, was seemingly, quote, missing that kept Georgia out of the championship mix. He says the offense, defense may have been great, but neither was elite the way we've come accustomed to see when it comes to a team winning national championships. But the sentence that Marcello wrote at CBSSports.com that perhaps stood out to us the most was the idea that this spring provides Georgia with a, quote, fresh start, and perhaps in the midst of that fresh start, with new blood stepping in, with new guys doing new things, he says there's reinvigorated competition and reinvigorated hope in Athens. Now, there's always going to be intense competition at UGA. That never changes. But the idea of the phrase reinvigorated hope for Georgia, what exactly does that mean, and where perhaps does that hope lie? In other words, for some Georgia fans who maybe agree with the first part of what Marcello said, and gosh knows we've covered some of this ground. Hey, not quite elite, not quite up to the national championship standard. Things could have been a little bit better in, various regards. I want to believe they can be different in 2025. Even though winning the SEC championship and beating Texas twice, we're never going to stop, harping on that. Even though that's all really good, I want to believe, and I want to have reason to believe, tangible proof, tangible evidence that 2025 for Georgia could perhaps be even better than it was in 2024. And so we said we're going to take a few days to talk about why that might be. We're going to allow our imagination to run wild, our mind to wander. Not all of these particular things are going to fully break Georgia's way, but let's talk about some of the good stuff that Georgia perhaps has on display this spring. Yesterday, if you listened to or watched the show, you'll remember we talked about Zachariah Branch and how Zachariah Branch was getting sort of hyped up by ESPN as a receiver coming to Georgia and a return man coming to Georgia after showing some initial promise at USC, being a former elite recruit. Probably not the season in 2024 he would have liked to have had. But given the need at Georgia for a playmaker, given Branch's history of sort of making plays in the past, especially to begin the 2023 season, and just given his overall athleticism, that he could be in line for a big year for Georgia. And what we said about that yesterday also was that it's kind of interesting how the national media and the local media perhaps have a little bit of a different vantage point on this. The national media kind of fixates on Branch because he's the former elite recruit. He played at USC. He had the big introduction to college football to begin the 2023 season. But locally, if you talk to people who know somebody, they'll sort of tell you, boy, the guy that seems to be turning heads in some of the winter workouts and making a name for himself perhaps might be Noah Thomas, maybe more so than Zachariah Branch. But either way, for a Georgia team that needs playmakers, the fact that locally a guy like Thomas, nationally a guy like Branch, the fact they're getting a little bit of attention right now, building some excitement around them right now, there you go. That's reinvigorated hope. Georgia needs to play better at wide receiver. Bringing in new blood at the receiver position gives you a chance to do that. Now, let's shift gears to today. New reason for reinvigorated hope and genuine, authentic enthusiasm and excitement as Georgia begins spring practice next week. And it's another in kind of a echo of what we talked about the other day, where some of the incoming freshmen to Georgia, the touted 5 stars, things like that, they are also getting sort of the right kind of attention here right now, right before the year begins. Some of this, of course, is just hype. We're not immune to that. We still think that's sort of fun. But nonetheless, we like to kind of give you a little bit of a survey of what's being said from time to time, and a different story, different writer, CBSSports.com, also looking in on one of Georgia's incoming freshmen. This time, the guy getting the attention is Isaiah Gibson. And what Will Backus writes about Isaiah Gibson this week at CBSSports.com, boy, if this doesn't get you excited about Georgia spring practice, I don't quite know what will. Let me show you Backus here for a moment. The headline of the story is Key Freshman to Watch During Spring. And among the names mentioned was a guy from Georgia. It is Isaiah Gibson, the 24/7 Sports ranked as the number 1 edge rusher in the country and the number 14 recruit overall nationally. Those are lofty numbers from Gibson. What Backus writes is this: Gibson is the highest-rated edge rusher to sign with Georgia in the modern recruiting era. That's a scary thought given the sheer amount of defensive talent that the Bulldogs have churned out under veteran coach Kirby Smart. Well, how interesting that. We're all of a sudden now in the age in which Kirby Smart's now a veteran head coach after it seems like just yesterday he was beginning his coaching career. We've lived long enough to see him now become a true veteran moving into his 10th season here. Backus goes on to write that Gibson also arrives at a big position of need for Georgia. That's true, which lost key edge Chaz Chambliss the NFL draft. Backus says that Gabe Harris is expected to step up for the Bulldogs, but he isn't the kind of player that will dominate snaps to the point that Gibson will be kept off the field. Given Gibson's athletic profile, Georgia can also experiment with moving Gibson around, and with that kind of versatility, he should carve out a nice year 1 role on a national title contender. Okay, so let's talk for a moment about what Will Backus says right there. And there is something that Backus writes that I think is very, very similar to what we said yesterday. We said yesterday that, boy, national media attention goes to Zachariah Branch for a ton of reasons. But locally, there's a lot of talk about Noah Thomas. This is a perfect example of this, too. Nationally, there's going to be a lot of attention on Isaiah Gibson coming into the Georgia program because of the recruiting ranking that he sported. And we're right there with that. You ought to be excited about a player of that magnitude coming in. Of course, that's the case. However, much the same way that we said, nationally they're focused on Branch, but locally we may be focused on Noah Thomas a little bit more. I think there's an element of this that's also perhaps true with Will Backus. He is touting, with good reason, Isaiah Gibson. But listen, you talk to people kind of a little closer to the program, a little more on the ground here in the kind of bubble of Dog Nation, I think they'll talk to you a lot about Gabe Harris. And I think they'll say that Harris's skill set combined with some experience in college, I think that there's a chance that Gabe Harris is actually better this year than what Will Backus suggests in that particular piece. Now, he's not writing about Gabe Harris. He's writing about Isaiah Gibson, so we're not going to say that his full potential opinion about Harris, if he even really knows much about him, is contained within that little blurb. But this is an example of how the local opinion and the national opinion are perhaps a little bit different. National opinion says, boy, look at this hotshot freshman. He's coming in to take over the world. Locally, we might say, and people who perhaps look closer to this than we are might say, yeah, Gibson has a real chance here, but Harris has got the experience that perhaps gives him the opportunity to maybe do just a little bit more. That's just kind of a difference between the local and the national opinion. However, there is also this, which is, this goes beyond just like, say, Georgia football or even college football. There's always going to be excitement in sports about newcomers. A lot of times in professional sports, this is with rookies. It's really one of the reasons why people love the NFL draft so much. The question is, hey, who are the new rookies? Who are the new people kind of coming into the league that are just going to be something new and fresh and different, something we haven't seen before? We're also on the verge of the start of the Major League Baseball season. There's always a lot of chatter about, hey, who are the hot prospects coming up to the major leagues and the guys that are going to be the best rookies. And some of this is because some of us like to collect like the rookie cards and the baseball and sports cards and things like that. But it's not always just that. Sometimes it's just sort of exciting and fresh and interesting to see something you haven't seen before. So there's always going to be a lot of energy in sports around new guys. And in professional sports, that's rookies. In college football, that's freshmen. So it's only natural that a guy like Gibson is getting that attention. But boy, when you think about the need at edge rush, at defensive end, putting a little bit of extra attention on guys who've also been here like Gabe Harris, we think that perhaps also makes some sense. But that's not to say that we don't agree with Will Backus in the from the standpoint that really and truly, if you're looking for freshmen that could make an impact because it is a position of need, because of the talent he possesses, Isaiah Gibson could certainly be one of those guys. And to give you a little bit more of an idea of the personality that Gibson brings with him to Georgia, let's travel back in time here, even before we kind of officially fully knew that Gibbs was going to come to Georgia, when Isaiah talked about with our Jeff Sintel as a part of a Dog Nation conversation in UGA recruiting, when Isaiah talked to Jeff and when he was talking about what it was he liked about Georgia, I think you were starting to get a bit of a glimpse at what Gibson might bring with him to UGA if he did definitely come, which now we know that he is. He's already there, in fact. Let's go back and hear Isaiah Gibson back when he was still a recruit.
I just feel like Georgia is what fits me most. You know what I'm saying? I like to work. I don't want anything given to me. That's really what it is. Like every other school, they'll throw you the world. I don't want everything thrown at me. I really just want to work for what I have because I always work for what I have now. So I just want to continue to do that. And yeah, I feel like Georgia's the best place for me.
So a little bit of win there. Obviously, sometimes these on-the-road interviews kind of have a little bit of, sort of natural sound that kind of creeps in there on that. But hopefully you heard what Gibson said. I don't want anything given to me. I expect to come into work. In fact, that's what I want to do. I mean, listen, there's always going to be sort of a special nature to high achievers in life. They want things to be hard because when you do something that's hard, you only have to share the bounty of your success with those who are also willing to do the hard thing, and that's usually a pretty small group of people. So that's usually a trait you find in high achievers across all fields, a willingness to do what's hard because they like the way that difficulty becomes its own gatekeeper. It keeps other people sort of outside the boundaries of that particular club. And so the fact that Gibson says, not only am I willing to do what's hard, I'm glad that it is hard. That's a hallmark of high achievers in a lot of areas of life. And that's one of the reasons why, if you're looking for a guy that could break through and could really have an immediate impact at Georgia, flash some of that during the spring, a guy who's, according to his own words, that willing to embrace the hard work, of course that would be the case. And like all sports fans, we like new, fresh things we haven't seen before. An incoming freshman of this magnitude would certainly get Georgia fans, to use the phrase we've used before, the hope level a little bit more reinvigorated. We think that's a cool thing. However, it's also worth reminding here, too, that in just the last few days alone, as I briefly alluded to a moment ago, Isaiah Gibson is not the only incoming freshman kind of along the Georgia defensive line, at least defensive front, depending on what position he ends up playing. He's not the only incoming freshman of high regard who's gotten a lot of attention. Now, it is one thing for, like, media guy to say, watch out for Isaiah Gibson. We put some value in that. It is a far different thing when an actual player in the Georgia locker room says that about another incoming Georgia player. In this particular case, you'll remember the other day we played audio and video as well from the NFL Scouting Combine of now departed Georgia defensive lineman Warren Brinson. He's on his way to the NFL, but as he leaves Georgia, looking at what's going to be left behind, he mentions a couple of guys kind of in the mix for playing time, but also takes a moment to kind of do for Elijah Griffin, another five-star defensive line signee. Brinson does for him what the CBS writer just did for Isaiah Gibson, Will Backus did for Isaiah Gibson, and it's worth kind of hearing this again in light of what's also now this morning being said of Isaiah Gibson. So let's hear Warren Brinson now talking about Elijah Griffin, and think about the idea of this Griffin that Brinson describes being paired with the Isaiah Gibson that Will Backus just described. Here's Brinson from just the other day.
Some of the younger defensive linemen, Jordan Hall, he had a down year just due to some injuries, but Jordan Hall is a tough guy. He's one of the vocal leaders on the team right now. Christian Miller. Christian Miller's a great player, man. Just got the twitchiness and explosive to be one of the best. And I think who I think is going to really take over for the Georgia Bulldogs like this upcoming season that people aren't seeing coming is Elijah Griffin, the freshman coming in. Elijah, man, I've known Elijah since 8th grade, and you look out. Just look out.
What is about Elijah? I mean, he comes as a five-star guy.
Yeah, our coaches have said that he's one of the best defensive line prospects they ever seen coming out of high school. And what I'm hearing about him in the weight room and what he's doing up there right now, it's matching the five-star.
Do you love that? What I'm seeing right now, not in some sort of like drill or something like that, but the actual weight room. The hard work of the offseason, the kind of winter workouts far removed from social media edits and media types or fans, just kind of in the quiet of being by yourself, behind closed doors, doing hard work. Warren Brinson said, we talked about this the other day, I see Elijah Griffin putting in the hard work that makes me believe that he's well on his way to living up to his five-star status. I love that from Brinson. And when you pair that with what a CBS writer is also saying about Isaiah Gibson, I love that too. And when you think about the chatter that transfer receivers are getting, we talked about yesterday, you love that as well. And we're not liars. We're not trying to be dumb here. We know that when it comes to all of these reasons for hope that we're giving you, using the words of other people, the evidence right there in front of our eyes, we know that not every single one of these storylines is going to break Georgia's way. In other words, not everybody's going to fully live up to the billing, at least right away. Some guys may battle injury. Some guys may find the step up to college play as a kind of a doozy. There's all kinds of stuff that's going to prevent everyone from achieving their top-end projections. That's just the way that college football works. It is really, really hard. It never stops being hard. But we're only a few days away from the beginning of spring practice. And around here, that's bringing, I think, a renewed sense of energy for us on our program. And the sense that I get from the Georgia fans that I'm lucky enough to speak to is many of them are feeling the same way, that Georgia's going to start 2025 right in the thick of the college football playoff and the national championship conversation. We have no idea how the season's going to conclude, but it begins exactly the way you want, with a spring practice next week, where lots of newcomers get a chance to make a name for themselves, veteran players get a chance to make the next step, and a whole bunch of guys who like wearing the red and black coming together to kind of form the sort of team that can be a major contender for all of this program's end-of-season goals. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Breda Pest Management. Glad you were with us, whether it's video, 10 a.m., radio, Athens, Sports Radio 960 Ref, and a great chance to speak to my guys on 960 Ref this morning. Every Wednesday morning I do a little chat with a Logan Booker, Dave Johnson. We always loved to be able to do that. That was really good stuff. We're also available for you on podcasts as well. Apple, Spotify, many of you sort of seeking out the show on your own on Apple. Not, listen, we all know this. Tim Cook, the Apple CEO, he's an Auburn grad. The fact that we have had Apple podcast issues, is this another chapter in the Deep South's oldest rivalry? Is Cook himself sabotaging our show on Apple? People are wondering. People are talking about that. Many are asking questions about that. But we do believe, in fact, I had a brief meeting this morning, that by hopefully end of the week, hopefully by Friday, that's all cleared up. So we are going to get all that squared away for you, and very, very happy to be able to do that. Big thanks to our friends at Breda Pest Management who make the show possible for you here today. Boy, you're talking about just doing great stuff. The official pest control provider of UGA Athletics. And we're kind of moving into that sort of springtime of year in which everybody wants to take good care of their home and make sure you're doing the right stuff. Well, obviously, one of the things, if you live in Georgia, proper care of your home includes your termite protection. You work with a company probably already. However, you may not be happy with that company. Let's just be honest. Some of these companies, just keeping up with and maintaining consistent service is just not always an easy thing to do. And maybe you got your brother-in-law's recommendation or something like that, and you realize it's sort of a fly-by-night company, and I don't really know how this is going. It seems like the quality of service is going down. The cost of service is almost certainly going up. Well, with our friends at Breda Pest Management, when you make the switch, that's not going to be the case. You're going to put more money back in your pocket just for making that decision. And you're also going to get the peace of mind and the prestige that comes with working with the same company that UGA does when it comes to their pest control needs. Stegman Coliseum, Foley Field, Sanford Stadium, all those great Georgia athletic venues kept bug, critter, termite free because of our friends at Breda Pest Management. By the way, speaking of critters, unfortunately, when you move towards the springtime of year, animals getting near your house and in some cases in your house, as much as I don't love to think about that because that is creepy, it is also a reality. So if you got something like that going on, they got literally wildlife specialists that sort of know how to eradicate that problem from your home and get it sealed back up so it never becomes a problem again. That's what Breda's all about. So find them online. It's BredaPest.com. BREDA, BredaPest.com for more on that today. Okay, two great guests for us. It is Davin Bellamy later on. Some of the names we were just mentioning, I'm going to talk to Davin a little more about that here coming up in a moment, about what the look for the actual Georgia defense might could be here this year. We're going to do some of that here in a bit. We've had some great conversation with Davin as of late. That's going to be a lot of fun. It's also Mike Griffith coming up as well. Mike was in Indianapolis for the NFL Scouting Combine. The workouts and stuff like that, I'll totally admit. I talked to Jake Fromm about this yesterday. I just don't care that much about that. And listen, for a lot of you, that's your your main thing. You love the draft stuff. You got your own stopwatches, and you're out there watching all that. For me, I just don't really care, and I don't think anybody's capable about caring about everything equally, and that's just something I've chosen not to care about that all that much. It's just not that interesting to me. But what is interesting is the interviews, when you get a chance to hear what we just heard from Warren Brinson and some of the other stuff that we've played for the last few days. I do think a lot of that kind of stuff is really compelling. So we'll talk more about some of that here coming up with Mike in a moment. But prior to that, how about Around the Doghouse here today, presented by our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau. And, man, I just think that what the Georgia basketball team has done, we're just going to kind of talk about this for a minute, and then we'll bring on Mike and talk some more about it with him. I just think that what the Georgia basketball team has done over the course of its last 3 games is just really commendable. And we're capable of being honest here. After a great start to the season, a remarkable run through the pre-conference season, the kind of marquee non-conference win like St. John's, St. John's has just blistered its way through the Big East. That's a huge win that Georgia got in the Bahamas. And then you kind of follow that up with 2 SEC wins out of the gate, a very good Kentucky team, a pretty good Oklahoma team, at least a tournament-level Oklahoma team for the most part, or right there at the tournament line. Georgia was flying high. And then after that, the rigor of a tough schedule kind of got to them. A couple of games against Auburn, you had to go to Tennessee, and kind of uncompetitive at Florida, and kind of reeling a little bit. But in the midst of that, you sort of saw some leakage start to take place. I didn't think that Georgia was as competitive at Arkansas as it should have been. home game like Mississippi State, just kind of once again just sort of saw that one kind of leak away from you. At Texas A&M was not really a thing of beauty. That there was a moment in which, and I said this, and I'll own what I said on that. You kind of wondered if Georgia was on the verge of giving all of the goodwill that it had earned in the kind of the pre-conference early portion of the season, kind of first half of the year. Were they on the verge of just giving all of that back? Well, the answer is no. At least for now, Georgia has resoundingly responded to the adversity that it was facing. The win that they got against Florida was really, really a statement. But the bigger statement for me is because, frankly, even bad teams pull upsets at home. If we're being honest, Georgia is far from the first team to feed off a big crowd and get a win that was unexpected when it comes to their home gym. This happens in basketball all the time for teams much worse than Georgia do that kind of stuff across the sport pretty regularly. However, when you then follow that up, playing in front of a friendly crowd, perhaps getting a benefit of a whistle or two, and now having to go to somebody else's gym, a Texas team that's probably in the tournament that actually won at a ranked Mississippi State last night, the fact that Georgia went into Austin and just like football, dominated from wire to wire, from pillar to post, what a statement that was. And South Carolina, which is not a good team this year, but once again, you're still playing in their gym. Gamecocks, through multiple coaches, have a habit of sometimes making it kind of ugly. You still found a way to win that one too. And now it certainly appears, because we said, you look at the Lunardi stuff, you go from being first four in to now you're, as of yesterday, kind of among the last four that could sort of avoid the kind of the first four and having to play that game in Dayton, Ohio. All of a sudden last night, Lunardi during the game says with a win that Georgia pretty well has it locked up. Now, Lunardi's not the only voice out there doing the bracketology stuff now, but we're going to trust that he's probably right about that with one game remaining in the regular season, that Georgia's probably done enough to be in the NCAA tournament. And listen, given where this program was and has been for years, that is an accomplishment. And as a sports fan, the only thing I think that I ever do truly ask, and the only thing you can ask, is just to be in the mix, to be involved, to have something, to have something to look forward to have a big game to be excited about. And now in the month of March, it certainly appears that Georgia's going to have some of that. People were excited last night. 6 o'clock's an early start. A lot of people had to get home from work early to be able to see this. But I heard people all across the state here kind of making plans to do that. This was a little bit of an appointment last night for fans who maybe don't always make appointments for college basketball. In front of a TV, Mike White also celebrated the fact that a bunch of Georgia fans traveled to Columbia for this one last night. This was a real win of real note, and it appears to be the kind of thing that's going to result in a real accomplishment for Georgia, returning to the big dance for the first time since 2015. Seems like it's going to happen. I think that's awesome. We'll continue to follow what the bracketology says about all this. And by the way, one more big home game coming up on Saturday. Wouldn't it be great to sort of pack Stegman Coliseum and put an emphatic punctuation mark on this regular season by beating Vanderbilt? I trust that many Georgia fans are going to want to be a part of that. And that is Around the Doghouse, presented today by our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau. So Georgia hoping to beat Vandy on Saturday for that insurance policy it needs, just to make sure it leaves no doubt about its tournament situation. Well, you also need insurance as well. Your auto insurance, your home insurance, life insurance perhaps. These are all really important considerations. And one of the biggest considerations you're going to have is, what company do I choose to work with? Well, listen, that is what our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau certainly understand. They want to be that option for you. Now, for a long time, Georgia Farm Bureau has supported Georgians. Georgia famous the world over for its agriculture. The stuff that Georgians grow ends up on the plate as delicious food for people around our country, around the world. And obviously the farmers that make that possible, we want to support them. And Georgia Farm Bureau has always been great about that. But the same level of support they provide to Georgia's farmers, they want to provide that support to you when it comes to your insurance needs. We say it all the time. Georgia Farm Bureau is always the home team. When you reach out, you meet one of their friendly agents, you're going to find out just how true that is for you. So I want you to give them a call, 877-404-1050. That's 877-404-1050. You can also find them online, gfbinsurance.com. You need insurance. You want to work with a friendly company. That, for us, is our folks at Georgia Farm Bureau. They're always the home team. Make sure you check them out today. Okay, we're going to check out Davin Bellamy later on. Some of the names we were just mentioning up the top of the show, we're going to dive a little deeper on some of that with a guy who truly knows what success on the defensive side of the ball looks like, the former Dawg Davin Bellamy. But for now, everything happening at Georgia, including a return to the big dance, perhaps. Let's talk to Mike Griffith here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Say hello to Mike Griffith here. So, Mike, there's been plenty of moments in the season where I didn't quite know if we'd ever actually get to this point near the finish line here. But I think that Georgia deserves a lot of credit for the way that it's played over the course of the last 3 games. It certainly looks like these Dogs could be back in the NCAA tournament. That is no small thing for me. I love March Madness. Throughout my life, it's really been one of my favorite sporting events, despite the fact that in my lifetime, it hasn't included Georgia very much, but it certainly appears it's going to include Georgia this year. Getting a chance to pencil in the Dogs in one of my brackets, or the only bracket I'll fill out, I think that's kind of a cool thing. So what'd you think last night, Georgia going on the road? South Carolina, not a great team, but to have a back-to-back road win, fresh off a big home performance against Florida, Georgia appears to right now be playing its best basketball of the season.
Well, I'd qualify a few things. South Carolina is last place in the SEC, but they did beat Clemson, and they'd won 2 of their last 3 games over NCAA tournament teams. So they were a team that was playing good. I mean, this is kind of like football, where the worst team in the league is still pretty good. We saw Mississippi State put some points up and throw for 300 yards between the hedges and play the Dogs within 10 and play Arizona State within 7. It's kind of like that in basketball. So that was still not a pushover game. And I think I heard you say earlier in the program, bad teams can win at home. And South Carolina had been doing that. So I don't want to undersell the significance of that. But do you realize, BA, that in the last 3 games, Georgia's only trailed for 40 seconds against Florida, Texas, and South Carolina? And what's really impressive about this, and to me, this is what really underscores what Mike White has done. This 3-game winning streak follows a stretch where Georgia had lost 9 of 11 games. And when you lose 9 of 11 games, even against great competition, even though 6 of those games were on the road against top 10 teams and 9 of those games were against top 25 opposition, it's easy for teams to give up. It's easy for them to start questioning. It's easy for them to start looking to the future. Transfer portal is real. You know that these guys are being contacted by other schools. Everyone's a free agent. And yet somehow there was the buy-in after losing 9 of 11 games, hearing from a lot of naysayers, same old Georgia, what's wrong with Georgia? These guys found themselves and pulled up an upset over a really good Final Four quality Florida team at home. You mentioned the home crowd made a difference. The fans stayed with the Dogs, helped them through that game. Then they went on the road against the Texas team that was on the bubble just like them, a coach fighting for his job, went on the road, led wire to wire, beat the Longhorns. And then the administration stepped in, Brandon, and I thought this was big from Josh Brooks, said, you know what? We're going to go ahead and fly you right from Texas to South Carolina. Georgia's on spring break. We're going to spend that extra money, give you that extra day, put you in the best possible position to win this game. Not a must win, but boy, that had been an ugly loss because they realized how important it was and they gathered themselves. So it was interesting. Mike White said that the locker room after the game, even though, you heard what Lenardi said, and who knows, it probably likely, but it was underwhelming, Mike said. It was an exhausted group of kids that have been focused, that have been playing their hearts out, that have been improving at each turn. The turnovers have gone down. The percentages have gone up in shooting. All the things Mike did during the bye week, adding new defenses that crossed up Auburn. My goodness, they played the best team in the country really tight at Auburn just a couple of weeks ago. So the arrow is up. All that said, you also pointed out, they need that win Saturday against Vandy. They need that momentum because now it's not just about making the tournament. If you're Georgia, you're saying, hey, we've thought all along we're a tournament team. Now it's, can you get yourself in a bracket where you win a tournament game? Can you get yourself in a bracket where with the right bounce, you hit a Sweet 16? Because this is a window of opportunity and you've got to cash in. It can't just be make the tournament, lose by 20 and season over. If you're Mike White and you're trying to sell this program and you're trying to leverage up and change the culture, because that's what we're talking about here. Can you change the culture where this isn't just a Asa Newell one and done, one off? Because Ace is going to be gone next year. Make no mistake about it. And he is the key. You need the next Asa Newell to come through the door, or you need the next 2 or 3 transfers that's going to make Georgia basketball a thing. This is an opportunity to take a big step. So now that opportunity's here, take care of business against Vandy. Go up to Nashville, win 1 or 2 tournament games. Get yourself into an 8-9 game. Get yourself worked up to an 8 seed where you've got a chance for that Sweet 16 appearance. That's where I see Georgia basketball right now.
Okay, so you were in Indianapolis last week with the NFL scouting combine. I've said before, I don't really care that much about the workouts. It's just not really my cup of tea. You can't be interested in everything, and I'm just not interested in what they used to call like the underwear Olympics. I just don't care. But I do like the interviews. I love hearing what the former Georgia players have to say about a wide variety of topics. What stood out to you that you heard last week?
Accountability, Brandon. You know, let's face it, the way the season ended was far less than ideal, and somehow in the mix we've lost our. I say we collectively. I'm thinking what I hear from the fans and even myself a little bit. You know, I got to keep reminding myself that was one hell of a season. I mean, what Georgia went through last year to win an SEC championship, it was tremendous. Of all the SEC championships that I've seen Georgia win, compete for, what the Dogs did last year in that conference with that adversity, receivers suspended, players injured, ridiculous schedule, tough road games, bad timing, quarterback distraction. And yet and still, they've got that SEC championship banner. And it's so big and it's so important. It's one that was more impressive to me than the other ones. Because 2021, Brandon, you and I can sit back. I don't know that we're ever going to see a college defense like that again, ever, with 5 future first rounders and 15 because of the portal, because I don't think we're ever going to see a team as dynamic as 2021. 2022, everything went great, undefeated season. Stetson had his feet under him. Monken had him hooked up. They had the offense, the defense, all that jazz. The playoffs were a breeze after they got by Ohio State. That TCU game was a laugher. I don't want to say it was just easier to beat LSU, but it just was. Last year, quarterback getting back to your question, talking to the players, the resiliency, and then talking about Notre Dame, right? And there was obviously all sorts of tragedy there, from the terrorist attack to Coach Smart's family and unfortunate outlier breaks. They play Notre Dame 10 times, they win 9, but not that day. The players were accountable. Etienne, when we asked him about the running game, he said, hey, I'm going to point at myself. My eyes weren't where they always needed to be. Asking Tate Ratledge about the offensive line. Hey, we didn't have the kind of year we needed to have, and we're going to be the first ones to admit that, right? Xavier Truss, asking him about Stacey Searles. Hey, this guy lights a fire under our ASS. Taking up for their coaches, taking up for, what the opportunity was, and them being willing to say, we just didn't get it done. When players say that, it's a testimony to the coaching and to the program and to the culture, because it'd be a lot easier from where they stand behind that podium to say it's this person's fault or it's that person's fault, because when they go to the combine, it's about representing themselves in the best way and making themselves out to be the greatest players ever. But they didn't do that. Tate Ratledge could have said, yeah, there were some things we could have done better. There was some play. He didn't. He said, hey, we didn't get it done. This is Tate representing himself and trying to build his own stock, but being man enough and character enough to stand up for the coaches and the culture. So that translated for me. I liked seeing the personality come out and Dom Lovett. I understood immediately, 5 minutes into that interview, what Kirby saw in him. You talk about a guy that has charisma. Same with ETN. Certainly we already knew about Jalen and Michael Williams. But what you really saw and felt was the character of this Georgia football team. And then you started to understand, wow, now I see the togetherness. Now I understand what was going on behind the scenes and how they were able to persevere. And it gave me hope that even as I sit here and see the 25 team as maybe one that's void of a first-round pick or a superstar or any reason to believe that they're going to win the conference again, I say, well, no, wait a minute. That culture is as healthy as ever. And I do believe that guys are going to emerge. I can't tell you why. I wish I could point out the reasons and say, well, here's why Georgia will win again and beat Texas and I can't see that on paper. But from what the guys talked about with the culture and the coaching, it renewed my confidence that somehow this spring, this Georgia football team is going to find their why, and they're going to find their way again.
Let me try to squeeze in one more real quick, and I want to be respectful of your time here. Spring practice next week. What you looking forward to?
Well, I've been asked about the quarterbacks probably as many times as you, and I really don't have an answer. How much of a competition will there be? Ryan Puglisi and Gunnar Stockton, and what does it look like? We know Frazier's back. We know the tight ends look incredible. We've heard all about Riddell from the players on the way out. They're saying, hey, keep an eye on this guy. We've seen enough sparks from Lawson Lucky. We know Oscar Delp is an NFL tight end. Is that enough? Probably not. Who will emerge as perimeter threats? How good are these transfers? How quickly can they make an impact? Defensively, what does that front seven look like? You had that fantastic interview with Christian Miller. You were all over it. You were the man on the spot. He turned out to be the most pivotal returning player. What does that look like? Is Big Baby really ready to go? How about these incoming freshmen? We heard Warren Brinson talk up Griffin tremendously. Is he really going to be an impact freshman? Can he have a Jalen Carter-like effect as a five-star that comes in and creates a ripple? Will there be train wreckers and havoc makers? How much more can C.J. Allen and Raylan Wilson do at linebacker? They're going to be 3-year starters now. They didn't really make that jump last year like I had hoped. Could this be the year they make a significant jump? The secondary looks incredible to me. The special teams look solid. But will we hear about the playmakers? What will Kirby's mode be like? What version of Kirby Smart will we get now? Let's face it. He had a tremendous loss. The staff is going to be challenged. There's questions about them. Their offseason talks to boosters weren't quite as optimistic and fun as they'd been in the past coming off that loss. There's a lot of hard work that's been going down at Butts-Mehre Heritage Hall. What's this team's personality going to be? What's the catchphrase going to be? Kirby is good at setting a mood and setting a mode. And what is it going to look like and sound like? So there's, to your point, between the basketball March Madness, the hitting the refresh on Georgia football, and of course, you didn't mention it, but the wizard Wes Johnson and this team that refuses to lose and this seems set on Omaha. Man, there's some great things happening in Athens right now, Brandon.
All right, Mike, we'll look forward to reading plenty from you about it at DawgNation.com and speak to you here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Braided Pest Management very soon as well.
I look forward to it. Thanks, Brandon. Have a good one.
Thanks a lot.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
We will keep the conversation going. Good interview coming up with Davin Bellamy here in a moment. That's a Wednesday staple for us. But prior to that, of course, we also thank Mike Griffith for his time as well. Prior to that, let's get ready to go cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And let's get ready for a great 2025 when it comes to Royal Caribbean. I love the fact that so many people, obviously, listen, we're the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. When people think of us, they think of Georgia football. But also in addition to that, when people think of me, they also think about Royal Caribbean Cruise Vacations. And I'm proud of that because, honestly, I do genuinely believe that if you can find a way to get away here this year and take a Royal Caribbean Cruise vacation, I think you'll be really glad that you did. And I do love the fact that Royal Caribbean, these, Oasis-class ships, like the newest of the ship, like Utopia of the Seas, the fact they're making that available for like 3 and 4 night sailings, because for people who take their first cruise, oftentimes the shorter sailing, like a long weekend or the 4-night cruise, which is the same as our DawgNation cruise, by the way, that's a good first experience for them. But when you're on a ship like Utopia of the Seas, you're experiencing the best that Royal Caribbean has to offer, including, if you're watching video right now, that's Giovanni's Table, a wonderful Italian restaurant. And the cool thing about Utopia of the Seas is you take this beautiful Italian restaurant concept, now you're putting it on 2 different floors of Utopia of the Seas. It's a much larger restaurant looking out over to the expanse of the boardwalk neighborhood. It's just an awesome dining experience. Wonderful scenery, great vibe, but also delicious food. So please reach out to Jessica Slater. She's a travel agent that can tell you all about this. You can give her a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com, for a lot more on what you need to do to get ready for a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation here in 2025. All right, the other day, Greg Sank was on the Paul Feinbaum show, and I thought he said a couple of interesting things. One of the things relates to the future of SEC schedule. Now, he also kind of talked about some criticism he had that like a Nebraska canceled a home-and-home with Tennessee, kind of unhappy about that. And listen, I've had my issues with Sankey, and I continue to do that. But the one thing I think that Sankey understands is the thing that makes college football special are the nature of the big games. And if you get fewer big games, then you have diminished the sport overall. And so some of that relates to the future of the SEC about, do they go to a 9-game conference schedule, which they probably need to? Do they stay stuck at 8? And with Feinbaum the other day, he was talking about that. I'm going to read this quote here on 3, transcribed. He says, the decision of our schedule relates to the 2026 season. He says, we're resolved for 2025. In other words, they chose to just kind of run it back, same SEC opponents, just flip-flopping the location. He goes on to say that's an 8-game schedule for 2025. However, I've said repeatedly, this is Sankey talking, we want to actually go 3 years of 16-team, 8-game, kind of single division, if you will, under a single format for our scheduling and the expansion of the college football playoff. So this was the first opportunity for our head coach and our athletic directors to gather in a room, just look back and talk about what happened. Sankey says now that took place the week before the college football playoff, where we learned a management committee meeting where I learned a lot. He says you've seen some changes in non-conference scheduling decisions that have taken place after the New Orleans meeting. So a lot of words here, but the basic gist is that there is some energy around going to a 9-game conference schedule in the SEC, but there are some member institutions who are concerned about how that might be viewed by the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, which goes back to the problem we've had for months now, and really for years, that almost all the issues we see in college football right now that perhaps not everybody loves related to like the on-field product, a lot of that can be traced back to the CFP committee just doesn't have the guts to do this job the way that it needs to be done. That there is no attempt to get these people into a room and say, let's talk about who the actual best teams are. That the only thing they're capable of doing is saying, well, so-and-so is 11-1 and so-and-so is 10-2 or so-and-so is 9-3. Therefore, the team that has the better record must be the better team. But as we've said before, that kind of thought process doesn't justify a committee. That's literally a meeting that could have been an email. If all you're doing is looking at the win-loss record, you're not actually making a qualitative decision. And so what some SEC teams are saying, it'd be good for us to have a 9-game conference schedule. It'd make the round robin a little easier to navigate. You'd see more teams more frequently. But if we're going to get punished because of our records, 9-3 South Carolina, 9-3 Ole Miss, 9-3 Alabama, then literally, what is the point of making it harder on ourselves to make the college football playoff? And by the way, the same thing is true as well for, you've heard it said in the future, there may be automatic bids, 4 of them for the SEC, 4 of them for the Big Ten. It's ridiculous that these two leagues would have the same number, but putting that aside, the fact that there would be automatic bids, the reason why you almost need that is because, once again, if the committee sees some Big 12 team at 11-1 or 10-2 or some ACC team, there is no ability on the part of this committee to say, well, the SEC team played a far more difficult schedule. Guys like Bill Conley, the math nerd, analytics type, has confirmed all of this. Far more difficult schedules as measured by data. But the committee is just incapable of using that. So here's what we see. Because the committee does its business the way that it is, you've got non-conference opponents afraid to play each other. Nebraska just canceled Tennessee. SEC concerned about expanding to a 9-game conference schedule because how will the committee treat it? That the committee's behavior is giving us more in college football of what we don't want. Exhibition-style non-conference games, guaranteed playoff bids, and they're giving us far less of what we do want, the sort of cutthroat competitive football that's defined this sport for our lifetime. So for the on-field product, the issues that we see, a lot of this, I believe, can be traced back to some issues with the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. I was going to do something on the committee, getting some new members, including a name of note for Georgia. Let me save that and do that on the other side of our next guest. I don't want to keep him waiting. I'm late, and I apologize. It's the great former Dog Davin Bellamy here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management. Davin, my apologies for being late to bring you on the program here today, but always love your opinion, always love having you here. Thanks so much for being here.
Brandon, it's all good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I want to ask you this. So we were talking a little earlier about a couple of, 5-star freshmen coming into Georgia. Isaiah Gibson, this is an edge rusher type, could play outside linebacker, might be a defensive end. Elijah Griffin, sort of a classic defensive tackle. And we said this before, that fans in all sports just like newcomers. Pro sports fans like rookies, college fans like incoming freshmen. It's just exciting to see new blood coming into a sport. But at the same time, we also know for a program that's as talent-rich as Georgia is, where veteran players, a little older, a little more developed spiritually, mentally, physically, that even for the elite recruits coming into a program, not always easy to make a big splash because college football is a sport where experience matters. So in light of the buzz around Griffin, Gibson, for a Georgia team that could use a little help up front, how much of an impact could you see talented freshmen like that making in their first year on campus?
Well, yeah, man. When it's when they're 5 stars, especially how highly ranked these guys are, you do have that chance where these guys just they come in and be these game changers. When you're talking about the defensive line, the Jalen Carters of the world are kind of outliers when it comes to being a freshman. When you're a D lineman and you're playing in high school, you look at his highlights right here. He's bringing something to the table that Georgia lacked last year, and I thought that was TFLs and explosive plays on defense.
Yeah,
we got players on our D line like Christian Miller, who are guys that can just take on the double team, but don't really get the offense's 2nd and 12s, 2nd and 13. And I see, with Griffin, he's just that guy that can go get his TFLs, but you can't really put a lot on those young guys because they're basically playing against, from high school, being the biggest guy, most dominant guy, on the field, especially, in the front 7, to now playing against guys that are more their size, and their technique is going to have, to be good. And that comes during the springtime, and that comes going against better offensive linemen that they're going to be going against, at Georgia. So, and then when you look at, Gibson, he's another guy that has all the measurables, 6'4", 280, and being that natural athlete that you just went on the edge. But like we talked about last week with Mikhail, it's all about skill when it comes to the defense end. In high school, it's easy just to be 6'4", 240 and run around somebody. But when you get to, playing in the SEC, your hand usage has to be very, accurate. Your angles have to be very, precise. And those things come with time. So even though those guys do have high ceilings, and I think they're going to be first-round products just off their ceiling, let's not put too much expectation on those guys too early.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. I think a lot of people would certainly understand where you're coming from on that. And what we said a little earlier was, okay, so national media, listen, I'm not immune to this. As I said before, it's always fun to get excited about incoming freshmen. And as you said, when it comes to the overall, obvious physical traits that a Gibson or a Griffin have, well, of course you would get excited about them. But what we were also saying is, okay, you fixate on the incoming freshman because you're kind of wowed by the ranking and the physical, appearance. But a guy like, say, Gabe Harris, who was an elite recruit, but maybe not quite as highly rated as the two guys we're mentioning, but he's also kind of been in a college program. It's almost a guy like that sort of gets forgotten by the media a little bit. But when you pair a little bit of time on the field, time spent in the program with not insignificant physical traits either, it's almost like sometimes those are the guys that we overlook because using the experience you have gained to pair with your physical abilities, if you're really looking for a breakthrough, sometimes it's actually the guys who've been on campus that have a better chance of providing that, right?
Yeah, man, that's a great point. With Gabe, Harris, his situation kind of reminds me of how I was brought up. Okay. When I got to Georgia, I sat the bench for 2 years, but the guys who I was behind were guys who went on to have long NFL careers and being Georgia greats, and that's Leonard Floyd and Jordan Jenkins. But by the time I got on the field, man, I was able to have a package early, gain trust there, get a bigger package, on the defense, gain trust there. And then you have these seasons where you're a redshirt sophomore and you got 3 sacks, you got 2.5 sacks. Well, that builds your confidence, and you've gotten adjusted to the speed, of the game at a great pace. because you're not forced to go in week one and go get 5 sacks. So by the time you're a red shirt, a sophomore or junior, you're kind of like a vet out there. And even though the fans have forgotten about you a little bit, you spent 3 years going against 5-star O-linemen. You spent 2-3 years in a Georgia scheme, and you've even got a little playing time sparingly, just like Gabe did. He got 2 sacks last year. Well, that reminds me of my red shirt, sophomore year when I would come in and spare Leonard Floyd. And, I finished the season with, I think, 3.5, 4 sacks off of just the third down packages that I had. And that led to so much confidence when it was time for me to be a starter, because I understood that out of the small third down plays that I'm getting, that they're trying to fit me in, I'm able to squeeze out, 3.5 sacks. Just wait until I can become a starter. So that's why I'm a big fan of Gabe Harris. Even though we have the younger guys, coming in, those guys got to get just to the speed of the game.
One of your former teammates on the other side of the ball said something years ago that always kind of stuck out to me. Isaiah Wilson, if you remember him, became a first-round pick. Now, obviously, he had some issues after that, but listen, he became a first-round pick. That's a significant accomplishment. But coming into Georgia as a freshman in 2017, I remember him saying that, he saw Andrew Thomas, who was not as highly rated coming out of high school as Wilson was, become a starter right away. Wilson didn't really play in 2017. And what Wilson said going back years ago was, okay, well, at first I was pretty disappointed by that. But he said, I actually learned a lot by watching. And you're a competitor. You don't want to be sitting. But how much did you learn while you were watching?
Man, it's a whole different ball game now. These guys are getting paid. And it's just a different generation. So, it's so fast, with social media. If you Google something now, you can get in 5 seconds instead of having to go find a dictionary, and look it up. So everyone right now just likes fast success. Back, my generation, I'm only 30 years old, man, I enjoyed learning. I understood early that Leonard Floyd is one of those guys. You know what I'm saying? I understood very early that Jordan Jenkins is one of those guys. So that's when the athlete has to look himself in the mirror and respect the game. When I say respect the game, I mean, if those guys are better than you, then you learn from them. You don't hate on them. You know what I'm saying? So I watched everything that, Leonard Floyd and Jordan Jenkins did. And I stole a lot of Leonard Floyd moves that got me sacks when he left. So, I learned so much from those guys that I can't even, put it into words. So when Isaiah, Wilson got there, he had, Isaiah Wynn there, who was a baller. And when you start to look at these high school guys, some of the stars are based off of just physically, does he have the look that we're looking for? So Georgia's always going to bring in 6'4", 6'5" defensive linemen that are 290 plus. But will those guys turn out to be the players that we expect them to be? Because a lot of them sometimes are brought off just off size. And in high school, you're the only person on the field that's 6'5", 300 pounds. So you make a lot of things look easy. But it won't until you get into the college program. How does he deal with class and stress? Can he go to workouts and go to class, still perform? Is he distracted by what's going on, in Athens? Is he a hard worker? Will he hit that freshman wall? All those things, take time to see. And I've seen the best guys, come in, have 5 stars, and just get, burnt out. You don't see that a lot with, Kirby Smart's program just because how it's ran. But all those things have to go into, consideration, and just sitting behind older guys who are eventually going to be, first rounders, can do a lot for your career.
Let me squeeze in one more. We've played a clip of Warren Brinson where he talks about some of the names we've already mentioned, but he also mentions guys like Christian Miller, guys like Jordan Hall. For my money, the importance of the defensive line, how valuable that has been for the best Georgia teams. You can make a case like guys like Hall coming off injury, guy like Miller, Georgia fortunate to get back. You can make a case that, names like that are among the most important players on the entire Georgia roster for this season, correct?
No, they are because they're the leaders. They're the leaders. Christian Miller has been there the longest now. This is his senior season. He's seen it done. He's had guys before him do it at a very high level, and now he's watching those same guys who he shared lockers with are now winning Super Bowls and doing it there. So he's a guy now that I'm pretty sure just being around that you have the aspirations of becoming the next Jalen or becoming the next Jordan Davis. So, and you look at guys like, Jordan Hall. I mean, when you're the older guy on the defensive line, this is a guy, it's his third year now, in the program, 5-star recruit. But now it's time to show that by leading the team and understanding that you committed to a Georgia team that was rolling. When I say rolling, I mean we're winning games, we're in the playoffs. So it's my job now that I'm the head honcho, the senior guy on the D-line, to make sure we keep that tradition going. And like Coach Jennings told me my senior year, you guys don't want to be the class, that messes it up.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That loses the 3-4 games and doesn't go to the playoffs. So it's time for those guys, the Christian Millers, the Jordan Halls, and the guys who've been on the roster the last 2-3 years to put their team on the back and get to where we need to get to.
Davin, I love the conversation. You know so much about it. I appreciate you sharing your insight with us. Always fun. Spring practice right around the corner. That means the football season itself won't be too far away from being here, too. So that's always good stuff. Davin, thanks for your time. We'll look forward to talking to you very soon here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management.
I'll see you next week, man. Go Dogs.
Go Dogs. Good stuff there from Davin Bellamy. Let me also mention this. I was going to do this a moment ago. We did get new members to our College Football Playoff Selection Committee. And I guess, congratulations go out to the former Georgia name of note here, Damon Evans, former athletic director, now a part of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. I don't know, man. I don't know how I feel about this. Listen, Evans is from my hometown. I didn't go to Gainesville High School, but I am from Gainesville. When Damon became athletic director, Georgia, that was a big deal for people. Hall County, he had kind of one of your own as athletic director. It's kind of a big deal. Had been a receiver, of course, at Georgia, kind of into the Dooley, start of the Ray Goff era. Him becoming athletic director, Georgia's a big deal. But obviously, it came to an end in very inglorious fashion. It was an embarrassing conclusion to his tenure as Georgia athletic director. And, of course, now he's back, as AD at Maryland. I guess, people deserve a chance to sort of rehabilitate themselves and turn the page and things like that. But you got 130-something ADs in college athletics. You couldn't find somebody with a less checkered past than this to be your athletic director. I just thought it was kind of weird. It's not that big of a deal. I'm really not that angry about it or anything like that. But it's pretty weird, right? And this is the kind of thing an organization does when the organization thinks it doesn't have to be accountable to anybody. When you don't worry about what kind of questions you're going to be asked because you don't plan on answering them, that's the sort of thing that you do, which, to say what I was saying a moment ago, also sort of helps explain some of the other college football playoff selection committee decisions, that it is a group of people and an organization that seems like it sort of moves, outside the boundaries of accountability. This is the sort of thing that you do when you don't really worry about what people are going to say very much. And listen, I don't hate Damon Evans, but, most of us, if we had a job coming to an end for the reason that Evans had a job come to an end, we're not going to find ourselves on an August body like the College Ball Playoff Selection Committee anytime soon. But I reckon, who cares? But interesting to see those. And by the way, if you're interested in the other names, Mark D'Antonio, former Michigan State coach, Ivan Mizell, media member, Chris Massaro, who's the AD at Middle Tennessee State, and Wesley Walls, former Ole Miss tight end. So we sort of think that the only people that have any real power on the committee are the ADs, that the former players and media types and sort of ex-coaches, generals, all the people that end up being on there, military types, they're all just packing peanuts. The real decisions are made by the athletic directors, and the athletic directors make that decision in the meeting before the meeting. And anything that happens in like Grapevine, Texas, is sort of all just for show. We are very, very skeptical, in other words, about the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, and we sort of always have been. Let me give you a couple of other shouts out before we get ready to go here. A couple of beverages that we love. First of all, our friends at the Finish Long Drink. Obviously, great time of year to be enjoying the Finish Long Drink. The Long Drink Cranberry, that's an awesome choice. Long Drink Zero, no carbs, no sugar. But the peach-flavored version here in the Peach State for a limited time. Long Drink Strong, 8.5% alcohol by volume. This is a really cool story for a really fun category of beverage. Delicious. If you like mixed drinks, but you don't want to mix the drink yourself, then you're kind of looking for like a ready-to-drink cocktail. That's sort of what the category of beverage the Finish Long Drink is. So if you want to find more about that, you can go to thelongdrink.com. You can also learn about how it originated back in Helsinki, 1950s, when the Summer Games were there in Finland. And it has worked its way to America, now here to Georgia, and it's been a huge part of DawgNation now for quite some time. So please find out more online about that, thelongdrink.com. That is thelongdrink.com. Also, our friends from Dr. Pepper, we appreciate them being a part of the program here, too, and the brand new option, Dr. Pepper Blackberry. How much fun is this? And listen, we love, y'all know I'm a big Dr. Pepper fan, but I also love Dr. Pepper and its relationship with college football and the fact that you see that with the Fansville commercials all fall along. But also for our DawgNation Invasion events this year, we had a huge presence from our friends at Dr. Pepper, including as a part of our run through the college football playoff. We were able to debut the blackberry flavor of Dr. Pepper right there for the folks at our DawgNation Invasion. We're super thrilled about that. And we've heard great feedback thus far from the brand new Dr. Pepper Blackberry and the Dr. Pepper Blackberry Zero Sugar. That's a great thing for you to try here today. Also, our buddy Jonathan from Dr. Pepper just recently celebrated some great news. We're happy about that for him. Just a lot of great things happening with Dr. Pepper. People love it, and I love to be able to share it with you when it comes to DawgNation Invasions and all the other big events we are doing. So all of that's really fun. Big thanks to Dr. Pepper as you're shopping at your local Kroger, wherever you're picking up some of your groceries. Pick up some Dr. Pepper or Dr. Pepper Blackberry and Dr. Pepper Blackberry Zero Sugar here today. So the other day, we were celebrating achievements for Georgia athletic programs, mentioning the Diamond Dogs, hot start for them, Georgia basketball, which at the time had earned a big win at Texas, and some of the softball had to walk off. However, there was one UGA athletic team that we did not take proper time to celebrate, and we've heard from some feedback on that. And so we're going to give golden shoes out today for those shouting out the Gym Dogs. Ed Thomas wrote in on X to say, DawgNation Daily, don't forget about the rise of the Gym Dogs. For more on that, our buddy Dina Pruitt, who's a big part of our DawgNation crews, who's a huge Gym Dog fan, wrote in email to say I wanted to give a shout out to the Gym Dogs for an amazing, and by the way, as Dina correctly points out, Gym Dogs is DOGS. Gym Dogs for an amazing comeback win Sunday evening. Kentucky was trying to win in Stegman for the first time ever. They led through 3 rotations. She says coming into the final routine, Gym Dogs needed a 9.9 to tie, and Lily Smith turned in a 9.925 on the floor exercise to defeat Kentucky. She says the Gym Dogs are currently 5th in the SEC, 10th in the nation. She says, on the cruise last year, Dean and I talked about the new coaching staff coming in, a little unconventional, non-traditional college route. She says, I'm a big enough person to admit I was wrong about those coaching hires. So good stuff from Dina, who loves the Gym Dogs, always there supporting them. We appreciate Ed Thomas writing in on that, too. They're performing very well, and that's a great thing to see. Obviously, a long history and tradition of success for Georgia when it comes to gymnastics. So let's make sure we give proper shouts out on all of that. Lousy, stinking Gators, we don't like them, but we love this. It's been 1,579 days since Florida has beaten Georgia. That's our Gator Hater Updater. Y'all have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time, do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. You can trust them on all of that. So we will get your comments. We're going to go a little quicker with the comments today just because I feel like we've kind of done a lot of that lately. So we'll do all of that. But we're glad you're here. Frank Patterson checking out. Frank, thanks for checking in today. It's been good to see you in here today. G. Grace making the comparison between Nate Oates and Bruce Pearl. I mean, I said this the other day. I don't know if I said this on air or during the cool down or what, but I do think that Auburn's going to be a tough team. I know Auburn lost last night, but they're essentially playing out the string right now. Auburn would be my pick to win the national championship. I would say you've got three teams in America right now head and shoulders better than everybody else. I'd say Auburn, Duke, and I'd probably put Houston in that category. Those to me right now are the three best teams in college football. And for as deep as the SEC is, my next group of like championship contenders is probably, it's like more of like an Iowa State for me probably than Alabama, Tennessee, Florida. I told you yesterday, Bama does not play enough defense. Tennessee doesn't score it well enough. And if I'm Florida, as dominant as they've been, I'm really bringing in a coach to March that has no tournament success really whatsoever. So if you told me between Auburn, Duke, Houston, I could have them against the field, I'm easily taking that. And I sort of suspect, even in that comparison, Auburn's perhaps better than the other two. Jay Shipes, I am not reading that. Georgia on Tap says, still mad at Damon for those Nike bats in Omaha. He says Gordo and company deserve better. Georgia on Tap certainly has a good long memory when it comes to stuff like that. And I don't know. I mean, I don't hold like a grudge against Damon Evans or anything like that, but he was fired in disgrace. And now he's on the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. I mean, it just seems like an odd choice to me. G. Gray says Houston is not better than Bama. He says we've already beaten Houston. Last top three team is Bama and Florida. Look, I mean, I'm suspecting another SEC team, and I'm either Bama or Florida's going to get number one seed. I do not think Alabama plays enough defense for the national championship. I just don't. It doesn't guarantee there'll be an early out, but if you're looking to shake up your bracket with some early outs, Alabama and listen, a year ago we were really high on Alabama, so I'm not. This is not me picking on the Crimson Tide. I'm trying to call it like I see it. A team that has had trouble getting stops to the degree that Alabama has is not cutting down the nets. Keith Black, thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate that. Wyatt Fielding pointing out, Georgia baseball gets one against High Point yesterday. They play State again today. Is this an early start again for these two teams? They play State again today. Georgia had to go to Georgia State last week they play like 3 p.m. You talk about not glamorous. This is one of the reasons why I love college baseball, is because for as fun as it is, there's a lot of college baseball that's just not glamorous at all, and playing in the bus depot in Decatur is not glamorous. But Georgia fought it out. And by the way, State's not a bad team. They have hit it like crazy to begin the year, at least as of last week they were. 3 p.m. first pitch today between Georgia and Georgia State. So looking for another win against the Panthers. Wyatt Fielding always good keeping up with that. And you got SEC play starting with softball here coming up this weekend. So that will be fun. Let us see what else. Jerry Dog fan looking back to the old days of like Andy Landers and Pat Summitt as SEC coaches. Yeah. Seems like Georgia women's basketball is, not quite. I mean, I know they got the great win against Tennessee on Saturday, but it seems like it's been kind of a struggle year for them a little bit. All right, let's see what else other platforms here. Let me go to DawgNation.com. Kent Holcomb asked about Cooper Flagg. So the fun battle this year has been between Flagg and Janai Broome as the player of the year. Broome was injured for a moment. It seems like Flagg kind of took over as the leader. And I think that Broome came back and, I think Broome's going to probably win the award, I think. Although, obviously, there's always going to be a little extra love for Duke. Flagg's clearly the better pro. So, I mean, to answer your question, Cooper Flagg is at worst the second best player in college basketball. He may be the best. I think that Broome from Auburn has a pretty good chance of winning player of the year. But Flagg's had an amazing year. And This is probably the best Duke team in a while. Now, Duke's always overrated. I do get that. At least they have been at times. This is some of y'all who know it better than me. This is probably the best Duke team of the John Shire era, perhaps. Trevor says, why the hate on Damon Evans? He says far worse coaches get second chances. No, it's not hate. And, you know, listen, I don't know that I've thought about Damon Evans in years, to be honest with you. I have not paid much attention to it. But you would like to think there was some sort of standard required to be on the college ball playoff selection committee. You'd like to. Let's see what else. And, like, look, I don't know. Let me just not say that. UGA Marine pointing out that SEC softball has 9 of the top 15 and 12 of the top 25. Yeah, it's amazing. Obviously, that league got even better by the addition of Oklahoma, which has a long history in softball. So, yeah, very, very impressive league for that. Randy Hall likes the hoodie. I appreciate that. Randy, I was saying this to our audience a little earlier. You're kind of, one way or another, sort of getting to the end of, like, fleecy season, you know, what the girls call sweater weather. You're sort of getting to the end of that a little bit. And so I'm trying to get one more good wear out of the fleece. It was windy today. I don't like wind. So I figured a little windy today. Why not do that? Got a little sun on my face the last few days, so it kind of handles the white a little bit better. I'm not quite so washed out. Brian Whitaker says that college baseball does not get enough TV time, SEC Network or ESPN Plus, but your only hope. Yeah, Brian, to me, it's just bad. College baseball is such a fun sport. And, you know, when they do put it on TV for, like, the end of the year, NCAA regionals, things like that, the ratings have been really good. They've really, the TV ratings for baseball have been really growing. ESPN just has a very weird relationship with baseball. Like, you know, the way in which it's treated Major League Baseball makes no sense at all. You know, they've essentially, you know, kicked MLB off the network at Sunday night package. They long since stopped doing Baseball Tonight, staples of my childhood, very, you know, highlights during Sports Center, few and far between to the extent that even still matters anymore. But Major League Baseball's presence on ESPN was kind of down to nothing. A lot of what they were doing, they're even outsourcing from the MLB network, which is kind of strange to me. And all of a sudden now they're not involved in Major League Baseball at all, when Major League Baseball is undeniably the second most popular professional sport. NFL, you can't touch that. In the realm of professional sports, Major League Baseball is clearly the second most popular, but ESPN just doesn't seem to care. And that lack of care for baseball seems to trickle down to college baseball as well, where in comparison to some of the other what you would think of as sort of non-revenue sports, you know, baseball just sort of gets just chucked in with everything else, despite the fact that there is a significant population of baseball fans. It's nowhere near as big, obviously, as certainly football, and it's probably not as popular overall as basketball is. But you can go to a lot of places that really care about college baseball. I mean, if I was going to the Box in Baton Rouge or Fayetteville, Starkville, Oxford, Columbia, these places, Columbia, South Carolina, I mean, these places across the SEC where it's just sold out every weekend, I might start to think, hey, maybe there's a business opportunity here and maybe we could lean into that. But there's just very little appetite to do that for ESPN. I mean, it's too simplistic and trite to say ESPN hates baseball. But if ESPN did hate baseball, would they be doing anything differently than they currently are? That's the question. Let's see what else. Ken Oldham says, I can't remember what Damon Evans did. Look, here's the thing. A lot of people have issues in their past they'd like to come back from. And I totally support that. You know, I would say that we are a forgiving society. I think that forgiving's good. sometimes the judgment's not how bad something is. Sometimes the judgment's how embarrassing something is. And I would say that, the situation involving Evans, if nothing else, was just kind of embarrassing. Let's see what else. Yeah, a lot of folks over here at DawgNation.com having a chat about that. We'll probably leave that alone. Chef Jay Bowen asking about the changes to Foley Field. So the biggest change you're going to notice is it's all turf now. And that is taking some real getting used to for me. As I've said before, I think that baseball on turf is just a different sport. Now, I don't know that it impacts the college game quite as much, but I'm not talking about like the old school like AstroTurf where you still had like the sliding pits, Major League Baseball. You still had some dirt. This is full turf all the way. I'm sure the infielders love it. And in college baseball, the ball doesn't land on the ground in the outfield all that much anyway. But boy, it takes a hop off that. If it does go to the gap, it's gone. It's gone all the way to the wall. And it just looks. I just think it looks a little bit weird. So there's that. And look, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's just taking some getting used to. The other thing, and this is undeniably good, is down the left field line, they've also built a brand new sort of baseball facility. There's like some, space for the team to use. They've kind of created a little bit of a different bleacher area out there. It looks really good. I think the improvements overall look really good. But I'm just kind of a late adopter when it comes to baseball on turf. Alan Hampton says, is Branson Robinson supposed to be able to practice this spring? Last I heard on Robinson was pretty positive. Seems like he's kind of on his way back. Obviously, Kirby should be able to give us full confirmation on that later on. Tyler Puglisi checks in to say, how great to meet you this year. Looking forward to next year, having a baby soon. So another Jersey Dog fans on the way. Go Dogs, love you, BA. Yeah, great. So Tyler from New Jersey drove down for a Georgia game a year ago. Maybe he flew. Either way, he was there for a game. Got a chance to see him there at the UGA bookstore. Tyler, congratulations on the new addition in your family, and we can't wait to see you back in Athens very soon. That's awesome stuff, man. Great stuff. Gary Roach reporting. The River Ridge High School girls basketball team going for a three-peat in the state championships this Friday in Macon. Boy, what an accomplishment that is. That's awesome, Gary. Appreciate you sharing that. That's really good stuff. Richie Bale says if Nike's giving Oregon all the money, all other Nike schools should want to sign with other companies. Yeah, so the funny thing is you don't see a lot of reporting on this, but the big money that that Oregon's getting, I believe is actually coming from Phil Knight, the Nike founder. Now, Georgia gets a lot of money from Nike. That swoosh all over the Georgia stuff, that's a pretty valuable contract for Georgia. So I don't know that Georgia is unhappy with its relationship with Nike. Players seem to like it. I don't always love – there's a lot about not even like – I'm not talking about politics. I'm just talking about like just the actual gear itself. I don't like Nike gear always as much as I maybe did when I was younger. Some of it fits weird. Shoes fit really weird. Some of the Nike shoes just fit so weird. And I would say that some of their Georgia red is sort of an odd color sometimes. Obviously, the silver breeches are an issue. So putting aside any kind of like cultural criticism, I would say that I don't love Nike gear as much as I used to. I'm just getting old, maybe. But Georgia gets a lot of money from Nike. I think they're kind of okay with that. I don't know why we don't see more reporting on this, but Nike is a corporation that has shareholders. It can't just give buku money to Oregon without having to have some accountability for that. I'm pretty sure that most of the money that Oregon enjoys doesn't come from Nike as much as it comes from the Nike founder, Phil Knight. which makes you wonder long term. Obviously, not to be morbid, but Knight's not a young man. Does that last in perpetuity? Will the estate always be that supportive of Oregon? In the next, in years down the road, that's going to become an issue. Alan Hampton says, I wish they would ban artificial turf from sports altogether. I want to see grass stains and dirt on uniforms during a game. Yeah, I kind of get the point on that. Sometimes you also see in baseball now where they may go turf on the infield because it does, certainly cut down on the maintenance costs, but still grass in the outfield. And I think for like a high school or a youth league type thing, I think that kind of makes some sense. Savannah Bryan says he wears 15 extra wide shoes, so not many Nikes in the closet. Yeah, that's a little tricky. Nike's never to me, Nike shoes are narrow as it is. That's my personal opinion. I can't obviously verify that, but they seem narrow to me. And some of the other brands are a little bit better about selling the sort of wides and things like that. All right, anything else before we go? Back on Facebook for a moment. Brian Whitaker checking out. Gary Holt checking out. Yeah, we're getting ready to check out too, guys. Yeah, Brian Whitaker says turf's a different monster when you're playing baseball. Yeah, I mean, you play in one of these like gigantic fields, ball hitting the gap, that thing's going to go to Kentucky. On a turf field, it's just gone. All right. We got to go. Y'all check out RS Andrews online, rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price is promised. You can trust them on all of that. They'll take good care of you, get your air conditioning tuned back up to factory fresh specs, get you ready for the big spring that's on its way. Or if you got a plumbing emergency or something like that, if your water heater goes out, in many cases, RS Andrews can replace that for you the same day. So trust our friends at RS Andrews. Take care of you for all of that. The RS, after all, stands for rapid service. They want to take good care of you. So find them online, rsandrews.com. That is rsandrews.com. You have a great day. Back here tomorrow, DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management. We'll look forward to talking to you then.